Hello and welcome to the PoliticsJOE podcast. I'm Ollie Dugmore. He's Ed Campbell, and we're joined by two very special guests today. Guys, why don't you tell us who you are and why you are sort of so firmly in the public eye right now?
Yeah, I'm Celeste Hirschman, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Somatica Institute, and we have just recently been on Virgin Island as the lead sexologist.
And I'm Danielle Harel, and I'm the other co-founder of the Somatica Institute. And we have been on Virgin Island and really bringing our method that we created to be kind of like help the virgins get into their bodies, into their sexuality, and learn kind of dating and intimacy skills.
For someone who's not seen the show, how would you describe it?
I think it's a documentary helping young people sort of discover who they are as sexual beings and start to practice the tools of intimacy in like a safe container so that they can feel confident when they go out into their dating lives, that they feel like, okay, I know how to, make a move. I know how to handle rejection. I know how to touch in a way that feels good to other people. And I know who I am, and I'm okay with it. Like I accept myself and love myself for who I am.
Do you know that who I am thing is what really stood out to me from your answer, because we've just watched the third episode, right? We're recording before the third episode aired, so we've had a sneak peek, right? So we sort of know the direction that what's about to happen. People will be listening and watching after this episode's aired, so we can kind of talk about it. But first couple of episodes I watched, and there was a lot of shock factor. I actually felt quite uncomfortable at moments watching it, right? And I was questioning my own interest, like, what purpose are the TV cameras fulfilling here? Am I being voyeuristic? Is there kind of something about me that just wants to see these people and almost, for want of a better word, point and be like, they're so different, aren't they? And I was wondering why I was enjoying it, right? And then we get to this third episode and, some really profound realizations for people about their gender identity, about their sexual identity. And I started to feel about it differently, Ed. I don't know if it was the same for you watching it.
Yeah, I think it seemed like the thesis of the show was the third episode, and that there's just these quite transformative moments, like life-changing moments. Like one woman realizes she's gay. She just thought she was bisexual, but she realizes through the therapy that you guys lead that she has no sexual interest in men. One man realizes, I don't actually know how to describe them, because they have a profound realization about their gender identity, but realizes that they might be lean more non-binary than they perhaps did, and it's something that they wouldn't have achieved without going on the show.
Yeah. And I think that's when people kind of like see the beginning and they think like, oh, it's all about sex, those sex crazed people. But the thing is that there's actually a lot of therapeutic components in it that help people, like feel into who they are and see like, oh, like they need to try and experiment with different things in order to get to a place that they say like, okay, that's not me, that is me, and help them kind of tap more into their own, be more of themselves. And I think everything that we're kind of looking for in this show is about more acceptance of who people are.
I guess what Ollie alluded to there in the shock factor comes down to your guys' method of therapy. Could you explain your approach to sex therapy?
Yeah, so we really believe that you can't learn intimacy from like reading it or talking about it. You actually have to practice. And I think particularly if you look at like the second episode where Jason starts out like he's so touch averse. He can't even wear any clothing that doesn't go past his, wrists. And then, in the session with me, he like starts to relax and he gets like, sexy energy in his eyes, and he's like touching in a really sensual way. Like, how would he learn how to do that? Like he didn't have any other opportunity to do it in a way that was safe and he could get some feedback and feel encouraged. So I feel like that's what gets people to the next level of confidence, is trying something and being successful at it.
Can you, for someone who's not as familiar with, I guess, the canon of sex therapy and how other practitioners address it, what are the differences then in that approach? So would other therapists sort of touch their patients in the same way? Like what's different between your method and what other people might do?
So they're like, of course, there are different kinds of therapists, both on the island and also outside. So we all familiar with talk therapists, right? And I think the point in this show was to actually bring more like somatic modalities into showing like how they can help people. And we see different kinds of practitioners. So Celeste and I bring the somatica method, which is clothes on, and we have different boundaries between the different modalities and different training. So we are always clothed on, and we're like practicing sensuality and practicing desire and practicing this connection and intimacy that's kind of like mutually there in order to help people kind of almost like retrain their nervous system and learn new ways. Like, when someone feels desired, it's like, oh my God, that's how it feels like to feel desired, like you saw Zach experiencing that. And there are other professionals like sexological body workers and surrogates on the show that each of them have different kinds of training and different kinds of boundaries.
Yeah, I guess I found it quite confronting, to be honest with you, right? I think it's with Jason, like you're on top of him.
Yes.
And I was like, I did not know when people say sex therapy, that's what that I guess the thing in your head, you're picturing, like a married couple who've had a couple of kids and like they've sort of lost the spark and they're doing talking therapy to try and find out what's going on.
Like a peep show.
Yeah, we don't talk to each other anymore and you never do the dishes and it'd be so helpful if you helped out around the house and I'm so tired. And you go, okay, that's probably how it is. And then you're like, what? Is that what happens? Is that what happens at the sex therapist? So I don't know, I found a lot of the show really quite confronting in that way, whether it was kind of as route one as like watching something like that happen, as well as trying to watch them unpick their emotions and how the virgins themselves actually felt being on the island.
I think when the first episode that I watched, I was like, "Oh, am I a prude? Am I? I'm clutching my pearls watching this. I was like, am I?"
But I'm so glad that you said that because we're seeing a lot of people be like, "Oh, cringe." There's like this word that comes up, and I think this question about prudishness also. I think you can sort of look at what's happening on screen, and you can say, "Oh, what they're doing is weird and wrong," or you can say like, "What's happening inside of me," which is what you did, which I think is really powerful. Like to start to unpack. What do I feel when I watch other people in intimacy? And like, do I feel totally comfortable in intimacy? And, like, is it okay that I get aroused when other people are aroused? Why not?
Yeah.
So I feel like there is a lot of like repression that causes us. That's why people are having less and less sex because of this fear of like, oh my God, intimacy, it's very frightening.
There was an element, I went to the press screening for the show, and you guys led an exercise afterwards. And I must admit, I didn't put my heart and soul into it in a room full of strangers. But there was like everyone was partnered up, and me and this guy that I didn't know, like the instruction was like, think about your like a sexual fantasy. I did not engage with that. Cards on chest. me and this guy afterwards, I was like, what I thought was normal, and it was totally unremarkable. But I stood there with my eyes closed. I would be. It's unfair to like even compare that to what you guys achieved in that. But I just found it quite striking, being like, I'm not. It wasn't the appropriate environment, I guess, for me to have like a breakthrough in my own sexuality in a room full of strangers. But it seemed just so daunting to even swing a leg at it. And what is remarkable is you get in the show people the buy-in from the people as well was quite incredible.
I know it was amazing and incredible to see the buy-in. And I think this idea that sex is a private thing, and that's why you're not supposed to look. It's one of those things that you don't look when people are kind of doing, but then it's so interesting and people are so curious. That's why they go to porn, because they want to see how do you do this thing? So I think the show creates amazing opportunity for people to see, oh, that's what intimacy looks like. Sometimes going to be awkward moments. Sometimes they wouldn't know what to do. Sometimes they're going to be like, oh my God, that's so weird, right? So, and so it gives people an opportunity not to feel like they have to perfect it, but there's like, some sort of a climb that happens for sure.
How did you guys weigh the balance? Because obviously there's the work you do without TV cameras filming it, right? And that's what you guys do. How did you weigh the ethics of, okay, we're going to take that and we're going to transplant it into a TV program that's going to be broadcast, on a public service broadcast. There's a large audience. Run me through the calculations in your head. Did you have any hesitancy about doing it all for the reasons you've just said, that actually that kind of, maybe not prudishness, but the idea that it's private is actually wrong and you wanted to try and challenge that? I don't know.
Well, one of the things that I thought was amazing was that the participants felt so alone. And then when they came together in a group, they felt so supported and they started feeling less weird. And I think they also generously wanted other people. They shared with us, that they wanted other people to feel less weird. And so I think in some ways, showing it on television is like normalizing it and giving people the opportunity to have a conversation about it. And we really wanted to help people, as these mores are changing, and people are like having like consent culture is coming in. Like, how do you escalate with ongoing consent in a way that's sexy and fun? Like, we haven't had those conversations. We haven't seen that happen. And so we wanted people to actually be able to see it so that they could try it on their own. And so we don't just like lose our erotic connections with each other because they're so fulfilling. Like that's what makes life fun and exciting, like love and intimacy.
Yeah, and we did really bring a lot of the, we teach trainings for 15 years. We train coaches to do this work, and we worked pre-production about like what the structure of the workshop's going to look like, and we really kind of built it up to fit what the participants were coming with. And what I loved about the TV crew is that they actually let us do our thing, and they're like sitting in the backside and like not intervening. It wasn't guided by them. It was actually guided by us. So they saw us doing our work just the way we do it. So it felt very natural to us to come and do it.
Yeah.
I think in the current media climate, or just climate in general, the only time you really consider sort of adult virgins is in like an incel sense. So if you're, I suppose any of the participants in the program, if you are sitting thinking about like, why am I a virgin? What can I do about that? If you Google that, you could end up down a really, really dark rabbit hole. So even seeing that there is like hope to like improve your intimacy or just a different avenue rather than becoming like a total, like a woman hater.
Yeah, I guess there's a broader societal need for this kind of programming, right? It's not just entertainment, right? Because actually, clearly, particularly when we're talking about sort of disaffected young guys and what they're doing politically, I'm not saying that like just getting a girlfriend is going to fix a lot of people's problems, right? But it's a key part of your development as an adolescent into an adult person and the way that you engage with society. So there is clearly like a purpose to helping people if they're struggling with that side of things. So we have to help them.
I think we're not just teaching how to have sex or how to find a girlfriend. We're teaching intimacy, like vulnerable communication. That helps you in every area of your life. Maybe being able to talk to your parents about your sexual identity. So all of those pieces are really, really important. And I love what you said about like giving people who are feeling hopeless another avenue. That is such a good point.
There's an amazing moment, I think, in the first episode where Zach talks about kind of how his insane level of like self-loathing, and hearing him talk about how he viewed himself, I was like actually quite shocked. I was like, Zach's a handsome guy. This is like, and he's like, I think I'm ugly. And there's a moment where I think it's you, Danielle, saying, I think you're sexy, and he's like, oh, he's all skipping afterwards. He's like, what?
Completely. And it is amazing. I love how effective it is actually to do this kind of work because it's just like, it's simple, and it's, I want to say it's real. I'm not like faking it. I think people always think that we're faking it. But when I was sitting in front of Zach, I was like always thinking like, wow, what's attractive about him? He doesn't know that about himself yet. And my job is to help him see how I can see him and how other people can see him and reflect it back to him. And also when people are in their arousal, they're so much more attractive when they're like, in their thinking heads and in the worries and the fears. So he got it right away. And he was like skipping and giving people advice. He was totally got it.
I think I'm wondering when those kind of compliments come out or sort of the interaction with those guys. There was a couple of moments in the show where I almost sort of took a step back and was like, wow, they're really sticking it on them in this, like they're like being quite forward, right? And hitting on them. And I was I didn't know, the question for me that was in my head all the time was like, for you guys specifically, when you're acting as professionals, do you have that emotional connection that I would certainly have if I was being intimate with another person, right? And how, for you on a personal level, it is when you're interacting with someone, like saying you're sexy, or you're on top of them and you're doing your like the touch work and that kind of things. Clearly, I assume, but I don't know, that you're going to form a bond with that person. And I don't know if you can separate that when you're talking sort of professionally versus personally. I don't know.
Well, I feel like that you can have intimacy with any person, like if I sat and looked in your eyes for a few minutes, we could have a lovely moment.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to mean, we're building a future together. And with these young folks, they knew they were coming for therapy. They wanted to learn. And every time I, like you said, when I was being quite forward, I also want you to notice that I was holding my body back and I was waiting. And I said, I said to Ben, like, you can kiss me on the cheek if you want to, but you don't have to. Like, I was making an invitation, but seeing what was authentically true for him. And then he gave me that sweet compliment too, like, oh, you're kind of my type. And but that's creepy. Like, he was worried that just giving me a sweet compliment was creepy.
Mm-hmm.
It was lovely. I was like, oh, great. I love being your type. And especially love it when you touch my hair like that, because that's my kryptonite.
Yeah. You did say that too. And he was like, really?
Yeah. And then you saw his face soften and he smiled. And like suddenly he's like a cute, handsome guy, where he was like traumatized around his facial expressions and he was so serious.
I thought that a lot, even just the body language of the participants. And you'd see when they're walking into like a teepee, a hut. I don't know where you guys were doing that, but the way they walked in versus the way they walked out.
Mm-hmm.
You could see the difference. That I think when you were talking about confidence, if so much of it's nonverbal, isn't it? The way that they carry themselves. And I don't know how long they're actually doing those sessions with you for, but after half an hour maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah.
The difference is really quite striking.
Yeah, it is. I'm telling you, it's super effective. I'm really big in practicality.
And very efficient. Like we had a sex therapist, like a talk therapist who took one of our trainings, and he said, boy, you can do in 6 weeks what takes me a year.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why he was doing our training.
Efficiency. You're now client base. Factory of sex therapy. He's like the Henry Ford of sex therapy.
But the thing is that I think people kind of really cringe about is this idea that like this moment of intimacy, I want to just reiterate what Celeste said. The moment of intimacy, people immediately go into like, that means we need to be forever together. And we say like, no, this moment of intimacy is worth it for the moment of intimacy that's happening. And it's a closed experience. You don't have to then like go and just be with me forever. It's just like you take it, you experience it, and then you take it to your life so you can cultivate those experiences over and over again with people that you care for, and with some people it's going to be emotional intimacy, with other people it's going to be erotic intimacy, but you learn about how to be in intimacy with people.
And you saw it on the dates, right? We could talk about episode 3. Yeah. So they brought them in. Did you see the way Jason kissed Pia's hand?
Yeah.
It was like 3 kisses off with eye contact. Like, what? He couldn't even, he sound like this when he first came to us.
Oh, wait, you didn't even give us a handshake, did you?
No,
there was no hug.
And he wouldn't even
when he came off the boat.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then like he couldn't even like wear short sleeves. Like Jason is a changed man.
And he's kissing Pia's hand.
Yeah.
While looking in her eyes.
Yeah.
That's so sexy.
And Emma like explodes onto the scene in her date with Viraj.
Yeah.
She's like inviting touch. And
yeah, that was great. Watching that date in particular, you're like, is this Love Island? Is this like an actual like dating show, like versus Virgin Island?
Do you know, I was watching that and I was sort of shouting at the TV at him, being like, she's putting it on you, man. We're like, now's the time, buddy. Like, this is the time. But it was, but also like very emotional. But that scene where she is, you're like holding the pillow up as a punching bag, and she says something like, this everyone that mistook my kindness as weakness, and she's kind of talk, and like it's like really emotional, very 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 touching. And you're sort of getting these moments of self-actualization that I wasn't expecting going into it. But I guess what was I expecting? Because at the end of the day, if I don't know, you've been telling yourself you're bi, but actually you're a lesbian, and you've been trying all the time, your attempts at like erotic intimacy have been with men, then it's not necessarily surprising that you shut down in the way that some of them did, or you're not sure about your gender identity. And maybe there is just kind of a degree of misapprehension or misunderstanding from society more broadly about what it is quite often that makes someone a virgin. It might be a confusion about their identity. It might be being neurodivergent. There's any sort of number of things that can feed into that picture, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I really love Tom and how he says, like, it's not about who I go in bed with. It's about how, how I go, like, who am I who is going to in bed with. It's just a very powerful sentence. He said it so beautifully.
I think the most shocking part of the show, the thing that's probably got the most attention is surrogate partner therapy. Can you talk about that a little bit and explain to the audience how that works and the benefits that brings to the client?
Want me to do it? Yeah, so surrogate partner therapy has been around for a long time, since the 70s with Masters and Johnson. And, they kind of studied it. They were sex researchers. They felt like this would be a really effective way to help people who had sexual challenges. And surrogate partners have a deep level of training, and they work in a triadic model with a therapist in case any of the emotions do come up around, connection or attachment. And they are able to have full sexual experiences with their clients. And so for those people who might have needed that on the island, we wanted them to be there to have that opportunity.
What sort of because from what we've seen so far in the episodes that have aired, I think you saw sort of opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Where one of the patients was kind of pushing the envelope a little bit and being, I don't know what's the right word, client, patient, or virgin. I don't know. Like,
I love participant.
Yeah, participant. All right, let's do that. Right. So one of the participants is, I think they're kind of like, rubbing their faces on each other's arms and hands. And I think that the surrogate partner says to him, would you like to go further? And he's like, yes. Yeah. I really want to go further. And I think it's kind of like, right, okay, we'll do it, next session, but that's the end of this one. Versus another where actually I think I can't remember the name of the participant who it was. I think it was with Andre, and she was getting quite sad, and it was like, right, that's the end of the session.
Taylor.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's what you're referencing about the surrogate partner. And there's a lot of the news is happening. Considerations and I guess assessment of the person there sat opposite and what it is they should be doing in each session. I don't know if you could talk a little bit about what those considerations are.
Yeah, so we knew that not everyone would necessarily meet a surrogate with their stay on the island, and we had meetings with the whole team after every workshop every day, and we kind of assessed where people need to go and what we think would be the next step for them. And like in every practice, sometimes you try something and it teaches you. We always look at this as a diagnostic opportunity. It's not like we always know ahead of time what's going to happen, right? So we do something, for example, Taylor meeting with Andre, it was like, wow, this was very telling. It was diagnostic. She clearly does not want to have a man touching her. Let's see what we can do next. So there was a lot of those, like us as the coaches meeting together and kind of deciding what will be like the next step for the participants.
And then she felt so safe with Kat, right?
Yeah.
She was able to really relax, and it was a big release for her and a huge realization. But if she hadn't had that experience in kind of a safe way of sitting in front of a man and testing it out and being like, I want to be his friend. I don't want to be his lover.
Yeah.
That was clarifying.
So what did you guys in that diagnostics, what did you learn as a part of this process? Like, how's it changed what you do professionally in the way that you think of yourselves?
I don't know if it changed a lot. I mean, we've been doing this for 20 years, so there wasn't anything that was too unexpected. But it was really fun to work with other types of professionals and to be able to meet people where they were in all those different ways. Yeah.
What about you, Danielle?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, we've been doing it for a long time, so there was no surprises for us. I do feel that there was I do want to really give a shout out to the participants because they were really amazing and dedicated. The way that they the way they bought in and wanted to do it and wanted to explore and wanted to take it further, even though it's like you saw them with the pillows cringing. Yeah. And they really were very brave, and we adore them.
They threw themselves in, and we didn't get to see all the stuff that was happening behind the scenes. We just saw them in the session, the workshops, but to see what they went back and they talked about it and they tried to work it out, like, what am I going to do next? And am I really taking this, as far as I can? They were dedicated. Because we were so proud of them.
And also they're learning from each other, like Tom was sitting with Taylor, talk about identity because they knew that she went through it just a little bit before that. So they're so supportive of each other. It was really amazing.
Yeah, I think the word you use, which is what I would as well, is brave.
Yeah.
Sort of the bravery of doing that, putting yourself out there. I mean, I think it's the component of being on the TV as well. I'm sure it's already a brave thing to do, to admit, say, I need help and I need to go and talk to someone about helping me with intimacy, but then I need someone to help me with intimacy and I need hundreds of thousands of people to watch that happening as well. It's an order of magnitude up, isn't it?
Do you think any of them, all of them, would have been able to achieve those breakthroughs without this process?
I think I think there's a real power in the group work that happens there, and we found it a lot in our work. There's something when you bring people together, there's such a huge opportunity to de-shamify, and that's a term that we came up with that people kind of start looking in the dictionary. It's not there yet, but maybe
we'll get it there.
We'll get it there.
We'll popularize it, yeah.
Which is really kind of like helping people feel like I'm not weird. I'm not different. There are other people here who are struggling with similar things. And I think this group process really moved along things much faster.
Yeah, I think some of them very possibly could have stayed stuck for a long time, and they have told us that it's really changed their lives.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because I think, looking beyond the show and to talk more broadly about our society, certainly British society, a lot of research showing that this next generation of young adults, Gen Z in particular, having less sex than previous cohorts that come before them. You guys mentioned earlier about kind of sexy, fun ways to engage and talk about consent. But equally, I don't know if it presumably is not like playing the animal game with someone that you're out on a date with. Maybe you can, depends where you are. If you're in the park, why not? But like, how do you, when you think and consider that problem, what do you view as ways of addressing it? Like, what are you saying, sort of younger people about how they could try to have more sex?
Well, sexy consent requires a lot more communication, which is why I think it needs a little bit more practice to it. Like, I wish that they taught it in school, And so let's say I'm on a date with you and I feel ready to kiss you, but I don't know if you're ready to kiss me or not. I could lean in, but that's scary and might end up in a non-consensual moment. Or I could say, wow, your lips are so beautiful. Do you feel ready for me to kiss you? Right? And there's like a very like intimate, sexy moment, and the person has a choice. So I want consent to be sexy like that, but not like, is it okay if I kiss you? Is it okay if I kiss you now?
Yeah.
Because so many
force the issue.
Yeah, right. Like not even look in each other's eyes. We need to learn how to be in these intimate
sign on the
moments.
dotted line.
Yeah.
And I think learning how to just look in people's eyes, I think people are just like, they're looking at screens. And so even just like making that eye contact, practicing with those things is so powerful.
And I do think many people are very scared of the consent moment or like crossing the boundaries. So they hold back too much because they don't have this like middle way of how do I do it without being maybe shamed. And, with social media, people are just like can be canceled in 3 minutes or like taking video of them being taken and they'll be like, oh my God, publicly shamed. So this like, we call it escalation with ongoing consent is really an amazing tool to kind of like keep running your erotic energy in your body and then reaching to someone while not crossing the boundary. It creates a lot of safety in the negotiation.
For someone watching this who might be in the position that the participants were a year ago, but they don't necessarily want to go on the show, what could they do to improve their confidence or their kind of their sense of sexuality in their own times if they don't have access to treatment like the one that you provide?
Yeah, we've made a bunch of worksheets, just free worksheets on our website where people can start exploring these things. We have classes, we want these kinds of experiential methods to spread all around and so that there's a low barrier to entry and everybody can access them. And that's why we wanted people to see somatic approaches and, maybe more people will want to train in them and it'll just become more and more accessible to a wider population and to keep this conversation around sexy consent going.
My dream, in addition to that, is that people will start practicing with each other. I call it practice with strangers. It's a thing. You just like say, hey, do you want to practice some intimacy skills with you? Maybe not on the tube. Just find a friend. Taking it to the next level.
81199.
Do you want to practice some skills? And then you kind of practice. I think people have this idea that I'm going back to that point, that you only can practice with your romantic partners, but practicing with people is growing your skills. And then you can take it to your romantic partners, but look into people's eyes with consent, asking them, are you going to practice with me? Can be a fantastic way to start taking those tools.
I flirt on the tube.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, she does.
What is that?
That's really interesting. Well, I do want to hear what that entails. But I feel like the tube is quite specifically everyone in the carriage is trying to find a way that they can all look in a place, but they're not looking at each other, right? It's like, I'm actually looking up here and my feet are really interesting right now. And I really don't want to be caught like, I thought I was staring into dead space, but it turns out I've actually been looking at Ed's crotch for 5 minutes. This is a problem.
It's an HR issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have a long history of that anyway. But typically as well, I think people with their commutes, they quite often feel like that's their separation between professional me, personal me, and they're often using it to decompress. I find it very strange. You'd be on a carriage with its sardines, right? We're all in each other's personal space. But if you would take your headphones off, it's like you could hear a pin drop. No one is saying anything. It's dead quiet. So, Celeste, you're going to tell me in that environment, what are we working with here?
I have very strong consent values. And so I'll look at somebody and smile. And if they don't smile back, I'm not going to try to engage. But if, they get a little smile, then maybe I'll be like, oh, excuse me. Like I'll say a sentence. Do they engage back? So I'm always gauging. Does somebody want to be having this experience with me or not? It's really important to me. But if they do, then it's super fun. And I've had some very fun flirts on the tube.
I wonder if there's a part for rejection or maybe fear of rejection as well, right? Where it's like, if you're very happy to, look at someone smile, and if they don't smile back, no problem. I'll smile at somebody else. And I wonder if there is that, if that fear of rejection is a bit of a barrier for...
I'm so happy you bring it up because I think people have this... I think that's another reason why people not having sex these days, the Gen Z, because they're so afraid of being rejected that they're not willing to take the risk. And I think like getting some sort of rejection is part of life, and learning to kind of it's okay. It doesn't say anything bad about me. It's just we're not interested in each other in the same way. And people take it very personally, and then they just freeze and don't go out to explore more and to try and say it's good to practice rejection and being rejected. It creates some sort of immunity.
Resilience. We need resilience around rejection. And I know as somebody who's more assertive and doesn't like to wait for somebody else to do something because it never happens.
Why is there on the flag? We're on the chair.
So I needed to develop resilience around rejection because, it's I'm not everybody's flavor, but I'm going to probably be more likely to make the first move in a situation. And so I need to, so I have a lot of compassion because I think often it's men's responsibility to do that. And I know how scary it is. If I'm going to go ask somebody for their number, my hands are still shaking after all these years. It's not like it goes away, but that's the bravery, right? You have to be awkward and you have to be like, oh my God, I can't even put your number in my phone because you do it.
Yeah. I guess that's part of part of the fun of it though, I guess. Right, is that adrenaline from doing that. And I think there's probably something to be said as well about making the other person feel safe when you're making that approach, right? That rejection is a viable and acceptable outcome from this interaction, right? If you, I don't know, we're out on a date and I try to kiss you and it's not on and you're not happy with it, that you don't feel like I'm going to be like, right, well, you can get home yourself then. It's it's still a safe environment. Okay, you've rejected me, that's fine. You're going to get home safe. It's I think that's a really important aspect of it as well.
Yeah, and also rejecting nicely is really important, because I think it's so brave to take a stand and say hey, I'm interested in you. So when people say that to me, I'm just like, wow, that's so brave that you did it. And, I might not be interested, but it's still really acknowledging that that's great that people did it. I think that can really help.
Your guys' careers must have coincided with the rise of dating apps. How do you think those have impacted people's sense of intimacy and romantic lives?
I think there's a throwaway culture, with dating apps. It's if anything goes wrong at all, it's easy to just be next.
Yeah.
And so we don't learn how to tolerate sort of the challenge of what if you have a little fight with somebody, How do you share your feelings? If something goes awkward, do you just leave, or do you go, well, let's talk about this for a minute. What just happened here? And those kinds of skills are going out of fashion because people don't have to kind of stick with things. They're just like, okay, I'll just swipe, go on to the next thing.
Yeah, but also if you think about it, for really sustained relationship for longer time, it doesn't have to be for a lifetime, but for longer time, you really do need those skills. You need to learn how to kind of talk about your feelings. You need to learn about like how to do repair or relationship repair. And yeah, this like the throwaway style is really doesn't teach people much. They just move on.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of certainly young guys feel that, even though in fact we've done the surveys ourselves, young women, young men, they all say by quite significant majorities that they prefer to meet people in real life, that they want to meet people in real life, but they don't. And I think that there's almost this sense of trapped, or that it's, I guess maybe that the app is a safer place because everyone on there is already marking themselves as available. There isn't a risk of as much rejection, or at least I guess you can't see that everyone might be swiping no on you, but you don't see it. So it's fine.
Defending yourself from it. There's also I think it's a fear of being perceived, one, as a creep, as being like, if you get something wrong in real life, or also being perceived as like a sexual being. I think, especially for men, it's quite a difficult thing to admit. Like, if you think about like in pop culture, like women talk about like vibrators and like dildos or sex toys that they have, whereas like a man with a fleshlight is like that's a joke. That's like the butt of a joke, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think like with like my girlfriend's friends probably talk about like sex. I probably talk about sex toys. What an insane thing to say. Sleepover talking about sex toys, but like
I think you're not be wearing very much. Actually,
but like one of my friends said, "Oh, I bought a fleshlight." I would be like, "Ooh."
Do you know, that's really interesting. When I was at a different job, we got, I think it was some sort of content thing with love. I was making a video and it was like showing men vibrators and like letting them figure out what they do. And so they sent us, probably like a grand's worth of gear, like huge moving, like as if you were moving house, full of anything and everything, you name it.
Machinery.
It was in there, right? For men, for women. And there was quite, just to sort of, it's anecdotal, but it supports your point. There was quite a lot of like really joyful feminine energy of coming over to, I put it sort of away from my desk and I put a message being like, have at it, guys, like go and we're done, like take what you want. And because it was like worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
But the way that the women were interacting with it was really like joyful. And it was like they all went over together and they were like leafing through and showing each other things, and they all went off and took them home. And there were male sex toys in there. And when I went back on the following Monday, there weren't any in there. But no one had been like, it wasn't like, oh, mate, should we go have a look at the fleshlights? Or,
that's a good one.
Yeah. I thought this cock ring is your vibe or whatever. It's like, it's not, it's just not in the same way, but they did all go. Like, I know they all went because there were a lot of them in there and they weren't the following day. It's, I guess maybe it's just innate differences between genders and sex. I don't know. But I think culturally, maybe there is a difference there.
Yeah, I think it's like, men don't want a sexual man is like lecherous, I think, rather than empowered.
Do you think?
I think that's how it's perceived.
Right, creepy. Well, the number one fear I hear from men is that they're going to be creepy. That's like the biggest fear in dating, and because so many of the people who we work with are particularly more in that like nice guy category who's having a lot of trouble making a move and something like that, and so they're afraid to even like have sexual desire, to show sexual desire. What women deal with and have historically is slut shaming and sort of like you're not supposed to be that sexual, but it has a different vibe for sure. The creepy fear is very, it really shuts men down in that way.
I guess at the other extreme though, I think there are kind of overtly, I'm thinking of like a Harry Styles type character, right? Who is someone in like the public eye who for me seems very like in tune with his sexuality, his sexual identity, and I don't think there is that kind of.
But not in the way of like Sabrina Carpenter. Like Sabrina Carpenter, like mimes sex acts on stage, and if Harry Styles doesn't do that, I think Harry Styles is like maybe the most sexual male pop culture star, but he doesn't push through the threshold of being like, I like doggy style or whatever.
About Russell Brand, and then he just comes,
he's done remarkable damage to male sexuality, hasn't he? Holy shit.
It was like the most.
Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's fine. Maybe we wouldn't need it.
male sexuality is a decades-long PR campaign.
We
brand.
Yeah, we need to undo the damage.
That's why I think we bring like a little bit more female sexuality to the forefront. We need vibrators. We need some tools so we can have our orgasms.
And how do men be sexy, without flowing over into creepy? I think that's a really good question, right? Like,
I wonder if it's confidence.
Yeah.
As in, speaking from personal experience, like I didn't feel terribly confident with women until I was about, 22. I'd had girlfriends and stuff. Like I was doing fine, but I wasn't but I couldn't really perceive that I was attractive. And then I actually don't know what it was. I just all of a sudden was like, oh, I'm confident now. There wasn't necessarily a moment. I didn't have a sex therapist saying I was sexy, but I just kind of got. Maybe it was I became more secure as like an adult. Like I had a job that I liked and was earning my own money or something like that. Like I suddenly became, I'm an attractive proposition, I guess. But I don't really know how you can do that if it's not happening, like, especially for the participants. Like I think I keep coming back to Zach because all it took for Zach was like, you're sexy, and he seemed fixed almost. Like if someone said that when he was 19, would he have ended up in that environment? I'm sure that's not the case for like a lot of the participants. Obviously had much more deep-rooted issues, but not everyone can have how do we afford that experience to everybody?
Yeah. I think what you saw with Zach was that he got the feedback that he's sexy, and he couldn't even like think about himself like that before. So that really impacted him very deeply. And then he was like able to go around, and he felt like he's he gave people advice, and he was like jumping around and skipping. And then, but I think what you're talking about is confidence. It is about, but there's another concept here, which is about not separating your erotic energy from your being, because I think many people think that their erotic energy is a bad thing, so they like park it and wait until they get to the bedroom in order to like bring it on. But learning to hold your erotic energy inside, but also not spilling it, that's where the skill is. And it can be very powerful because you're walking around, you're feeling your erotic energy, you can like smile and bring it on, but you can also like tame it down a little bit, and that creates confidence.
Can you tell us more about, you said about learning how to do that, right? So if someone's listening now going, do you know what, I'd really like to be able to do that.
She's ready to do this.
I'm ready.
If you're listening, very much changing body posture. We're going to do it right now. So
doing it. Celeste is ready. Olivia, you're ready.
I guess so. Yeah.
I mean, I think when I work with men, a lot of times, like I notice that they're in this sort of scarcity. Their sexual energy is leaking out the sides, but it's not direct. So they'll like peek over at my boobs, like a clandestine, peek, right? And then it's like, well, where I'm here, you know what I mean? And so like I'll teach a man to like, okay, like start looking in my eyes, right? And then check me out a little bit. And then come back and look in my eyes. Like I'm here with you and I'm admiring you. And I'm with you again. And that takes a certain level of sexual confidence that I think a lot of men don't have. So they're just like, sex. And it's like, hello.
The
intimacy, right? The intimacy is missing. So
it's about being deliberate with
yeah, exactly.
Rather than just being like a sneaky glance. Like a deliberate glance is more attractive than
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Sneaky. Right.
Yes.
If either of you wants to check me out.
Because it's also not shying away from it. It's also not shying away from it, because I think that's the fear, like you only stick with the eyes or you only stick with the boobs. And the
duality of man, eyes or boobs. Yeah.
Wait, you can actually travel.
Yeah, you can go between the two.
And kind of do a nice,
So let's say there's a guy he's going, right, I'm going to carry my erotic energy. I don't want it to spill out, but I'm going to carry it and be aware of it and cognizant of it. And he might be thinking, Celeste, are you telling me that I should be like checking people out in public, that I should be, holding eye contact, running my eyes over them? I think there will be a lot of people who are like, I can't fucking do that. Like that feels like I'm making myself too vulnerable. That there might be a question about consent. I don't know. How do you?
It is very vulnerable. And like I said, there's the moment. The moment of consent is somebody giving you the energy back. Because if they're not, then it is creepy, right? But if they are, then maybe you just escalate it a little bit, like you smile and you think something sexy in your mind, but you don't have to say anything sexy. And then it kind of comes across.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I'm imagining like Jim Carrey in The Mask. The Mask. Yeah. Somebody stop me on this.
Somebody put it down.
Like green face.
I think that's all I have in terms of questions for you guys. I guess the only thing I'd like to ask maybe is sort of for you guys to talk a little bit about what's made you proud about participating in this process. What's something that you found particularly rewarding?
Everything. Really, honestly. I'm really proud of the participants. They were amazing. They are amazing. They're still bringing themselves out, and it's very brave to come out after a show like this and still show yourself out on TV, on social media. It's very brave. They were really signed up to the process, and they all had amazing transformations going on for them. And we're really delighted for being able to show a different way of working with people that we found is super effective and helpful, and really kind of leaves a mark that's like really changes people's life forever.
Yeah, deeply, deeply proud of their courage and their willingness to actually destigmatize virginity and to go through this process so earnestly. Really beautiful.
Yeah, I think destigmatize is probably the operative word, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's what virgin carries. Virgin is such a loaded term, and you'd preconceived notions when you heard the title.
Yeah,
you I imagine 12 sniveling nerds, which is more on me, I guess, than on society. I'm not going to take the full burden of that. I think it's good to see that.
Absolve myself of a little bit of the blame. A little bit of preconceptions. They aren't all mine. Yeah.
But it'll be so helpful if someone is in that environment or in that situation to see like a positive story rather than just be like incel stories.
Yes.
Yeah, I did when I was watching it, particularly those first couple of episodes. I was asking myself a lot of questions about, is this exploitative? Why do I want to watch this? Is there like a voyeuristic component here? And then as it's gone on, and there are still 4 more episodes to run, I think Mondays and Tuesdays on Channel 4, it becomes clear that actually the sort of like we've discussed, the journey of the participants, there is a lot of kind of self-actualization, a lot of learning about who they are, their identities, and what they're into that certainly changed my perspective on it. Danielle, Celeste, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us. We're really, really grateful. And enjoy the rest of your media tour, and best of luck with Somatica Institute and everything else that you guys work on. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. It's been pure pleasure.
It has, yeah. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.